Hall Communications provides equal opportunities for all legally qualified political candidates in accordance with FCC regulations. If you are a candidate for public office and would like to request equal time regarding content that has aired, please contact our station directly. We will be happy to work with you to schedule appropriate airtime. For more information, please reach out to the station office. 860-456-1111.
Welcome to the September 25th episode of Right Now with Chris Reddy, Mike DeSaulniers, and Curtis Eller on 1400 AM, 95.3 FM, WILI. We have an exciting episode of local and state political issues to discuss this afternoon, but first I want to take a special moment to thank one of our sponsors, Wyndham Industries, building strong foundations for tomorrow. We appreciate your support. I want to start off, guys, by saying that in preparing for this episode this week, I was given an absolute gift of state legislative issues with the resignation of the Pura chairwoman, Marissa Gillette, on Friday. So I want to jump right into it and start to talk about the relationship of Eversource, Pura, and the state legislature. And I want to begin with a kind of brief history about how we have come to the situation that we are in Connecticut. You go back to 2011. This was Public Act 11-80. And really what this did was it separated what was then the Department of Environmental Protection. It formed the Department of Energy and Environmental Protection. And it created PURA, which is the Public Utilities Regulatory Authority, from what was previously known as the Department of Public Utility Control, or DPUC. The creation of PURA underneath the DEEP really kind of put a distinct issue into the state legislation by creating almost a parent and child relationship between a regulatory authority over what is virtually a monopoly in Connecticut and electrical providers and electrical generators in the form of Eversource and Avangrid. And it put this underneath the DEEP, which really you have to look at this as something that goes against both missions of these two organizations. You have the Department of now Energy and Environmental Protection, and you have the Public Utilities Regulatory Authority, which is supposed to oversee the rates and money that's being used by our utility companies at the expense of taxpayers. And there really has to come a point where we see that this is a model that has not been replicated anywhere in the nation. At the time, Connecticut thought they were pioneering the opportunity for the regulatory body to fall underneath the DEEP. But this hasn't been followed anywhere, and it has not produced the results that we're looking for in control over a monopoly of electrical generators and producers and distributors in the state that now has created a situation where last year when I was running for state senate, I spent a lot of time talking about the public benefits charge, the sharp increase that we noted last July in our electrical bills. This was something that I managed to talk about for months, but it also forced me to dive deep into what is actually happening here. And I'm going to bring this full circle around from what we found out last Wednesday, where the emails that were supposedly at the heart of this scandal that surrounded Pura were actually discovered and recognized by the legal representation of the utility companies who were looking for documentation of what was happening at Pura as a regulatory board. And then it followed up 2 days later with the resignation of Marissa Gillette, who is the chairwoman of Pura. So to take you back on this history a little bit, when the Pura Regulatory Board was formed in 2011, it was originally designated as a 3-panel commission. There was 3 commissioners who would oversee the kind of quasi-judicial management of our utility companies, and they they kind of had to set a precedent for legislation and how we were going to control how much money was being spent, where it was being spent. And unfortunately, for a long time, these public benefit charges that were present in our bills just in the past couple of years, since there was a differentiation between where money was being spent by our utilities, this kind of showed us how legislation was able to hide behind what was originally part of the delivery charges in our bills. If you remember years ago, our electric bills from Eversource only showed how much it cost to generate the electricity and how much it was to deliver the electricity.
Generation charge, the delivery charge.
Exactly.
Right. Yep.
And in that, the public benefits was absorbed into that delivery charge, so you didn't see it for decades. What happened a few years ago was that legislation changed where they separated the bill, and it started to show that there was a separate legislative point to our bills that was directly on the unmandated fees that the state was charging for ratepayers. We saw this in many different programs that were part of the public benefits charge. In fact, there was 57 different programs that fall under the public benefits. But one of the ones that was most contentious was the repayment of what are considered hardship bills. People that were unable to, pay for their electric bills that had built up over time. And this was really from the COVID era where there was a moratorium that was set for years. And we're going to get into that in a little bit more detail in just a couple of minutes. But what's happened in the past year in the state legislature was first that we came up to a period in April where the state legislature was able to reappoint Marissa Gillette as the chairwoman for PURA. And this was under a lot of contention. And what I was trying to bring full circle here was that on April 15th, Republican senators did boycott that vote. And if you were watching, I happened to be there that day and listening live right in the chambers as the entire caucus said, we are not going to be complicit in this type of backroom deals that are going on, in this type of corruption that is happening here. And that's some of the issues that I want to bring forward. But what ended up happening after the caucus walked out was that Democrats did vote to appoint Marissa Gillette for another term in a 21-0 vote. Now, what has happened in the past 10 months is that there's been a number of legal proceedings and lawsuits that have been filed by lawyers representing the utility companies that really contend that as chairwoman, there has been a concerted effort for her to become the presiding officer for any type of motion or appeal that comes forward to PURA in a way that has really limited the ability of other commissioners to be involved in the process. And really what it comes down to is two whistleblowers who said that there was emails that were sent out from the chairwoman first stating that other commissioners were not to directly contact staff experts at PURA on regulatory issues that were brought up by motions to PURA, but also that thereby kind of limiting the influence that these other commissioners have.
Kind of.
Well,
how are they getting to do their job without any? You can't have a quasi-judicial process without expert testimony,
correct.
expert opinion.
You're right. And all this,
and if it has to get filtered through the chair, they're only going to get the expert opinion that the chair wants them to receive.
Correct. And you're absolutely right, Curtis. There's a couple of issues here. First are that, not only are they only able to consult with the chairwoman through her to these experts, but in addition to that, it also, really kind of show that there was some sort of antagonism between the PURA regulatory authority and then the utility companies, and thereby also the legislative body in Hartford that oversees the regulation of these utilities. What they really were looking for in all of these FOIA requests that extended over 10 months was for two particular emails. One of these emails was the one that directly said that the other commissioners were not to ask for any specific information from these staff experts. But then also there was a concern that many of these rulings that were happening through PURA were being done kind of unilaterally, in that the chairwoman had created an atmosphere where she was the presiding officer in all of these hearings. And there are specific statutes in Connecticut, general statutes, that dictate what a presiding officer is allowed and not allowed to do in this kind of regulatory authority here. One of the things that really is a concern is that as a presiding officer, there is an appeal process that allows for the utility companies to come back and say, hey, look, if you didn't conduct an entire vote by the entire commission, then we have an opportunity to ask for that as a commission vote and a consensus of the majority, rather than going to court litigation, which is where much of this is trapped right now. And that is obviously a long and expensive endeavor in Connecticut. What the concern is that this atmosphere created a single presiding officer where one person was allowed to make these decisions without necessarily including the other commissioners. Now, I have to kind of preface this by saying that the PURA authority now is supposed to be 5 individuals, 5 commissioners.
So it went from 3 originally?
It was originally 3. It did increase to 5.
Okay.
But those 2 positions were never filled. So for the past 4 years, it's really only been 3 commissioners that have been making this decision. But as soon as you get to a presiding officer that's now unilaterally making the decisions, you have one person that's making significantly cost, effective decisions that are being now turned over to taxpayers and in turn ratepayers for these utility companies. One of the really big concerns here is that Marissa Gillette, as the chairwoman of PURA, and having been her background is not only a bachelor's of science degree in bioengineering, but she also has a Juris Doctorate from Baltimore Law School. So she should be aware of these things. And it turns out that for months there was investigations going on looking for these emails that supposedly stated that there was going to be a presiding officer, that was going to be Marissa Gillette in all of these motions that were brought to docket through PURA, but then also that the authority of the other 2 commissioners were not as important as very simply the presiding officer. So there's a lot of concerns here that there is some impropriety going on in these decisions that are being made. And while a lot of the decisions could have simply been applied to their executive secretary, who was the one who signed the block signature in many of these docket motions, the real concern is that you have a few of these motions that did have significant impact on ratepayers. Granted, a lot of this does sound like administrative issues that the lawyers are starting to bring up. Who signed what? Was there a vote? Was there actually a motion brought up to vote for this as a full commission, which we really don't have. Now, I know both of you involved in local politics, you know that a quorum of voters is important to any of our local processes in, making issues happen.
Pretty fundamental tenet of democracy here.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And as a lawyer, you have to know that these the existence of these emails and them not being presented in a FOIA request is directly a violation of discovery doctrine, which is one of our absolute cornerstones of jurisprudence. When you ignore that and the statements being made by Pura for months where, we have no evidence that any of these emails existed, even though you had witnesses, key witnesses, who said, yes, I saw these emails, we discussed these emails, and now all of a sudden they're not present. That brings into question many issues that are going on here that do absolutely affect ratepayers. And I do want to give you an example of one of these issues, and this comes from a docket motion that first started in 2023. And I'm going to take, again, a little bit of history here back. If you remember, in 2020, when COVID first started, a moratorium was put on shutoffs for people that are in hardships for their electric bills. The idea was that if we have people who cannot go to work because COVID has said you can't show up to work to help, stem this infectious disease from propagating within the population, we need to help people so that their electricity doesn't shut off, their heat isn't shut off.
At the outset, with all that uncertainty, it sounds reasonable. It sounds humane.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. The concern was that Connecticut extended that moratorium years beyond the rest of the country. We were back to work. We were economies that were, again, getting back into the workplace. And on April 24th of 2023, two names that you'll hear mentioned a couple times here, Senator Needleman and Representative Steinberg from Connecticut sent a letter to Marissa Gillette asking that she extend the COVID era shutoff moratorium until October 31st, 2023.
Wow.
Okay. It gets better. 3 days later, in this ruling, which was numbered Motion 88 on Pura's docket, actually issued an extension until May 2nd of 2024.
I had no idea.
And this brings us right to the period of time where a month later, last July, we saw that enormous increase in our public benefits charge on our electric bills.
Yes.
In fact, that one decision added an additional $70 million to the public benefits charge that ratepayers were forced to recoup to the electric companies simply by extending that period from first the requested October 31st, 2023, but then all the way until May 2nd of 2024. This was years beyond any other state in the United States.
We were the only
ones that went that far.
Wow.
In July last year, we noticed those public benefits skyrocketed. And this was when really people started to become upset and voice out their opinion. This is when there was 10,000 Connecticut residents who signed a petition that said, we need to end the public benefits charges here. What has happened since then is kind of this back and forth. Well, a portion of the public benefits charge is related to Billstone. Some of it is related to these hardship bills that weren't paid. There are many other programs, as I alluded to earlier, 57 in fact, that fall under these combined public benefits charges. Some of them include even advertising for Eversource. Up until 2023, a significant portion of these public benefits included paying lobbyists to lobby for Eversource that you were paying for. There are many other aspects to this, but what I want people to understand is that right now it is over $1 billion per year as a hidden tax that is paid by ratepayers in Connecticut. If you look at the time frame between 2004 and 2024, the estimate at a low end is that at least $7 billion has been contributed by Connecticut ratepayers to these public benefit charges that have been hidden there. And that's the unfortunate thing, is that legislators have been shielded by these public benefit charges being easily identifiable on your bill until just a couple of years ago. And that's really when this has become an issue.
It sounds like they're still shielded by saying, oh, it's Pure's responsibility to evaluate this and if it's appropriate. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, that is fair to say. One thing that I will say is that the legislation and what they have done to try and correct this public benefits is that that was a couple months ago, the legislation bonded $155 million to pay down specifically the hardship portion of the public benefits.
I still read the paper, and when I saw a bunch of Democratic politicians, they had their hands up cheering for bonding millions and millions of dollars.
Now,
I was confused. I'm never happy to have to borrow money to pay my electric bill.
Which actually saves us what?
it doesn't save us anything. It's a shell game.
It saves us negative money because you're paying interest.
Right.
Yes, you are. And in fact, it's a little over $2 million in interest that now are going to be paid by Connecticut taxpayers rather than ratepayers as part of their electric bill. So this is where we stand right now. We have another case of Connecticut kicking the can down the road, saying, well, we're going to take $6 to $10 off of your electric bill in the form of this public benefits by bonding $155 million to taxpayers for the next X amount of time. These type of things really kind of put you in a mindset where you're thinking, this is really like just the epitome of corruption. Like this is just we as ratepayers are not benefiting from either PURA having this antagonistic relationship with the utility authorities. They need to work together, and there needs to be a representative on PURA who is there for the ratepayers. Because right now we are among the very highest of electrical utility ratepayers in the country.
Yeah, last I heard, we're number 3 in the whole country. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And you have to keep in mind, like, of the states that we're talking about here, like, we're talking about, like, we're up there with states like Hawaii, an island in the middle of the Pacific, where you could swim as far as you need to go, and you're just hitting water. And we're right up there with an isolated little island state. We're right neck and neck with the electric rates. They have to, every ounce of coal they burn and oil that they use and solar panels that are getting shipped in from thousands of miles away, and we are right neck and neck paying electric prices with them. That's unbelievable.
Right. And those public benefits charges are specifically because of legislative mandates that are put in through Hartford. So this is something that we need to look at correcting, and this is our opportunity now where we have the opportunity to put in a new chairperson for PURA to kind of increase the ability of these two entities to work together. We're coming to our first commercial break. We're going to see you back in a couple of minutes. This is WILI 1400 AM, 95.3 FM, and Right Now. Welcome back to Right Now with Chris Reddy, Mike DeSaulniers, and Curtis Eller on 95.3 WILI and 1400 AM. We have been talking about Eversource, PURA, and the resignation of the PURA chairwoman last week, Marissa Gillette. We did have a caller call in and ask us about Eversource. One thing that I wanted to bring up specifically about Eversource's company, we have to understand that as a private entity and someone who's beholden to shareholders, we really can't blame Eversource for all of the issues that we are suffering with our electric bills that we've seen a huge increase in the past few years. I do want to make sure that it is understood that Eversource has shown significant profits in the past year. In fact, year to date, they are up almost 20%.
That is 2.5 times better than the market as a whole. That's a good stock. I'd call that a buy.
Yep, that's absolutely significant. But the thing here is that in Connecticut, as a virtual monopoly on the electrical generation and distribution, we have to be able to control this. And it seems like in Connecticut, there is an environment where There's quid pro quo. There is backroom deals that are going on at the legislative level. And I will bring up a few of these concerns in the next few minutes here as we're talking about this. One thing that came about in the boycott of the vote to reappoint Marissa Gillette back on April 15th in the Senate chambers in Hartford was that the backroom deal that supposedly was going to happen was that a sitting senator was going to be appointed as a commissioner of PURA. And I want to be very clear that this, as I was sitting there, raised concerns to me because I spent a lot of time researching this topic last year. And this particular senator had been a principal shareholder and owner-operator of a energy distribution company that ended up being investigated by PURA for its mismanagement. And in fact, PURA had applied not only fines and penalties that totaled over $1.17 million to this company. And now there's a backroom deal going on where this senator is going to be appointed as a commissioner of the board that investigated him, brings into question some very big concerns.
Wow.
This is the type of thing that's going on when you have one party that has been in charge for so long that all of these regulatory normal practices are disregarded. So those are things we have to be very concerned about looking forward in here. There are some other things that are really concerning to me, and a lot of this has to do with the green energy deals that have been put in since 2015 in Connecticut. One of these that we're going to take a look at right now is something that, again, has been another hot topic in the past couple of weeks, and this is the offshore wind project that has been going on in Long Island Sound that was halted for a short period of time by the Trump administration. We're talking about the New London State Pier that required upgrades to the facility in order to accommodate the New London State Pier becoming a wind power hub for this offshore wind production. Originally, this was sold to the state of Connecticut as a $93 million project. Very quickly, this inflated to $300 million, and no one can explain this increase.
Listen, people get so angry at me at town meetings when there's a new project, a new development proposed, spending public money. I always try to take the perspective that, okay, I got your quote, I got your number. When I think about whether or not the town can afford it, I always multiply by 3. And people get angry about me, tell me I'm being a pessimist. I try to remind them that we live in Connecticut.
Right.
And this is what happens. Here we are, $93 million offshore project turns into $300 million, and no one can explain why. No one can ever explain why. But when you're doing a public project, when you think of a number, multiply by 3.
What even makes this more absurd is that the companies that are associated with the project have been fined tens of thousands of dollars by the Office of State Ethics for undisclosed lobbying in Hartford. One of these companies is also right now the subject of a federal investigation. So we have serious concerns here. We can all agree we want to protect our environment.
Sure.
We all want clean, cheap energy provided to our state. Like, that's something we can all come together on.
100%.
We need to do this not just simply following dogma of the majority party, but we also have to have concern for the people who are paying for this, which are us, the taxpayers.
Absolutely.
To have a renewable portfolio standard, an RPS, which is what Connecticut has designed, that we reach renewable energy standards, that 40% of our energy by 2030 is from renewable sources, is something that, from a financial standpoint, is impractical for many people in this state. Let's talk about some of the specifics in how our energy is produced in Connecticut. Okay? Natural gas is clearly number one.
Oh, yeah, by far.
Do you have any idea how much that accounts for in our energy generation, Curtis?
Oh, I'm going to take a stab. I'm going to say 70%.
You're close. You're very close. 57.9% of our energy comes from natural gas.
There we go.
7 of the 10 largest electrical generators in Connecticut use liquid natural gas.
Okay.
Second is Millstone.
Of course.
37.4%. This was something that was brought up by the legislature all through the beginning of the year when public benefits charges and our electric bills were hot topics. And they said, well, most of the public benefits charge is Millstone. It's true. A significant portion is Millstone. What I have to say about that is that Millstone is providing us. They are generating the electricity that we are using. If we did not provide something to Millstone in 2017, we would be 37.4% less in energy generation in Connecticut. And would you be surprised if during peak demand issues we had rolling brownouts across the state? I wouldn't be. Okay?
And that's that's the issue that Connecticut has had a problem with so long in the past is how we generate during peak use.
Correct. Absolutely. And the problem that we have in New England is that we are blockaded by New York State, which is the gateway for natural gas coming in from Pennsylvania and the Midwest into New England. The other option we have is to source to Canada, which I would much rather see American energy being provided to Connecticut residents over energy that we have to pay for from coming from out of the country.
Common sense.
Right? The other concern that I have here is that when we look at how Connecticut has aggressively taken on some of these standards that were initially set by California, and we realized, even the governor realized a couple of last year, that we would not be able to meet some of these standards for electric vehicles, for 40% of our renewable portfolio standard to be provided by solar panels. We've talked about natural gas and nuclear. Let me ask you this. What percentage of our energy generation, Mike, do you want to take a guess this time, is provided by solar?
2.5%, 3%?
You're very close. 3.8%. Three-quarters of those...
For all the driving around I do in Eastern Connecticut and all the fields that are covered in panels. Franklin Mushroom Farm, all down 32. You're telling me with all these panels I see around, that adds up to
3.8%, and three-quarters of those, 75% of that 3.8% that's provided are from small rooftop panels.
No kidding.
Yes.
So it's almost like one of the densest populated states in the country, maybe something that takes up so much room. Might not be the solution for us.
We're limited. We are greatly limited by this. And if you look at now the goal of reaching 40% by 2030, if you figure that each one of these electrical panels provides about 350 to 400 watts of power, which is the industry standard, that means by 2030, we are going to have to introduce between 4.1 and 4.7 million more solar panels in Connecticut. Where's this going to go?
With that caller that talked about investing in Eversource, maybe I should be investing in whoever makes these panels.
Well, unfortunately, it comes out of China.
Right. Yeah.
Can't win.
Now, let's continue looking at where our energy comes from. How about biomass, which is the solid waste, recovery of landfill gases, and wood waste that's being burned to produce electricity?
Yeah, we all see that when we drive up 395 in Lisbon.
Yep.
Lisbon, yeah.
What do you figure? A couple percent?
1%.
One.
Okay.
Okay.
Let's look at wind. This is the big issue here in Long Island right now with offshore wind and inshore wind turbines. Where do you think our percentage is for wind generation?
Well, we just spent $300 million on that project in New London. It's got to be 20%.
I can't see it be more than 1.5%, 2%.
0.02%.
Oh boy!
All right. In order to meet the 2,000 megawatt standard for 2030, we are going to need between 667 and 800 onshore wind turbines or 150 offshore wind turbines in the next 4.5 years.
And I can only imagine what the ongoing maintenance is. I mean, it sounds like that's an issue all across the world. How to deal with maintaining these things out in the middle of the ocean. The landfills of the propeller blades, if I'm using the right word here.
You are correct. Those are not recyclable. Those have to be buried back into a mine somewhere in Canada that eventually we're going to have to pay for at the end of the life of these wind turbines.
Mike and I, we were down at Third Thursday representing the Republican team, which was awesome. It was actually really well attended too. I think that had the carnival on Gilson, got a lot of young people out too. I think it was a nice night. We met somebody in the fishing industry here that lives and works in town, and they were talking about their buddies on boats passing by these new London windmills,
oil slicks,
just pouring oil out of them, keeping up on the maintenance. Right. How do you do that? How do you get 100 feet up on a windmill sitting out in the middle of the ocean? I don't know if we have a solution to how do we change a bearing? How do we fix a seal blowing out in the ocean in the open wind?
How do you put out a fire in one of these turbines that's 100 feet off the shore of the ocean, or off the sea level of the ocean?
That would probably cancel out some of the emissions if that happened, huh?
And now you have all the chemicals that are parts of the lubricants in these wind turbines that are toxic chemicals being spilled right into the ocean. Not to mention the impact on the environment that we're already seeing in marine life around these windmills. There's a lot of issues that we have to contend with.
And a lot of people joke about this, but it's just true. They choose where to put these windmills based on where the wind currents go, these corridors.
Right.
Those wind currents, where they're planned, are the same migratory patterns of our large birds. We lose so many of our large, precious, rare, endangered birds to these machines. And we have to. It's great. Like everybody said, we want to live in a clean state. Everyone that lives in Connecticut lives here because it's a beautiful, tree-covered state. We all love our environment here, but we really need to think through these solutions and the problems that they cause before we get ourselves excited and start plopping these things in the middle of the ocean, leaking oil, killing birds.
Right. They're killing the birds, they're leaking the oil, and then there's studies with the vibrations that they're putting off that are
no kidding. What happens then?
It's killing the fish in the ocean. It's pushing them away. So now your fishing industry is gone, your pricing going up. So everything is affecting our everyday life by these things that it's you don't get something for nothing.
That's right.
And I think a lot more research needs to be done on it. And before they put this stuff up, you've got to let the public know what's involved with this. This isn't. We're not talking about a little spot of oil in your driveway.
It's
That's right.
spewing out gallons and gallons of this stuff on a regular basis. So you brought up a good point, Mike, about some of the solutions and how we can start to move forward in a way that will not only protect ratepayers and hopefully provide some relief from some of these public benefit charges. As I start to talk about these public benefit charges, I want to bring this up to you guys. I brought in a prop here for us to look at.
An anxiety attack just seeing those shades of green and blue.
Does everybody see what I have in my hands here? Curtis, would you like to tell me what I have?
You have your Eversource bill.
This is not my Eversource bill. Okay? This is a Eversource bill that I'll explain in just one moment. But I want you to read the number that is on this Eversource bill. Look up in the corner.
Well, we've got a comma in this bill. We got a $19,574 bill and 94 cents.
If you didn't hear that correctly, this is a residential electrical bill for a home in Willimantic for $19,574.94. This was given to me last year by a friend of mine. This is a rental property here in town. This was someone who was on housing assistance, was on subsidies from public benefits, for their electric bill, for their heating costs. This is a house that does have electric heat.
Okay.
This bill was never paid. This is what is on your public benefits charge, is bills like this that went unpaid that are now your responsibility as a ratepayer because of the public benefits charges that have been added to our electric bills because of the legislation.
That's a sobering thought. Right. That's a local example right here.
This is one local example. This is probably replicated hundreds or thousands of times throughout the state of Connecticut. And I'll tell you why. I know this property. This is a friend of mine whose property this belongs to. It's been in their family for decades. Mm-hmm. It was a rental property when this bill accrued. The tenant left without paying this bill. And the reason why I think this bill is as high as it is, besides there being electrical heat in the house, is that several times I've driven by this property, and at the time I saw the resident sitting on the front porch of this house in the middle of winter with their front door wide open. When you don't pay the bill, when you're not responsible for writing the check and handing your hard-earned money over to pay your bill, you don't care. And this is what happens. We have a $20,000 electric bill that someone walked away from that now is our responsibility.
And we got to be able to talk about this. We have to be able to talk about just common sense truths.
True.
Right.
Nobody on this table, or anyone that I know on our side, has any issue with helping somebody out in need.
Correct.
But just common sense is common sense. Like you said, if there's absolutely no responsibility for paying for it, then why would there be responsibility for keeping the bill down? Mm-hmm. If somebody else is picking up the tab, that's human nature. That's common sense.
Exactly.
And we need to tackle this fact without getting into us versus them.
Absolutely correct. I have all the compassion for people that need a hand up.
Sure.
We just can't keep providing handout after handout after handout. And that's why I brought up that point earlier where specifically a state senator and a state representative said, you need to extend this moratorium another 6 months, and it was extended a year. And that single unilateral decision cost the ratepayers in Connecticut over $70 million of additional funds in their public benefits charge. So before I switch over to you guys having an opportunity to speak on some local issues, I do want to talk about some of the solutions that I think are possible for what we can do to not only decrease our electric bills, but also take away some of these public benefits charges. First and foremost is that we have to separate PURA from DEEP. PURA has to have the autonomy to protect the interests of the ratepayers. Like I said before, this is a model that has never been followed by any other state and never shown to work, where a regulatory authority falls underneath a state agency where all of these commissioners and directors are appointees from the state governor, like the state governor. He's the one who decides who it is that's going to be in charge of these commissions. When you have a political appointee that is now running a regulatory authority that's supposed to look out for the best interest of ratepayers, there's a conflict of interest there. We have to be very careful about that. Second is that we have to limit future power purchase agreements to 150% over the wholesale electrical market. Power purchase agreements are usually funded by hedge fund managers, hedge funds where investors say, okay, we're going to support this particular energy program, and in return, we're banking on the fact that this is going to be an investment that's going to return on our hedge fund. The state of Connecticut should not be forced into a power purchase agreement, which is a very complex agreement between a utility, a regulatory authority, and the ratepayers and the legislature. The example that I want to show is that the typical wind farm, the power purchase agreements from those are generally 300 to 400% over the wholesale electrical market. This makes no financial sense. We've seen that a lot of these green energies come at a cost. And again, we all want to see a change over to renewable resources, but it can't be done at the expense of the ratepayer and the taxpayer.
That's the wrong place.
Funding this 100%. Like, we are being crushed. Connecticut has an affordability issue, and one of the biggest things that we are dealing with right now are exorbitant electrical bills.
Yes.
We need to limit future purchase power agreements to 150%, and that's it. We cannot be spending more than that. We have to look at ways that we can increase natural gas distribution to Connecticut. And as we've talked about before, the gateways that we have are New York. I do want to say that just recently, Algonquin Gas did enter an agreement with Connecticut looking at increasing natural gas across New York into Connecticut to help offset some of this. The other thing that we need to look at is the fact that our other natural gas opportunity is from Canada. As much as I'd rather see domestic natural gas being something that's being supplied to the ratepayers of Connecticut, we need to look at the fact that for the near future, natural gas provides the majority of our electrical generation, and that's something that we cannot simply discount and cut off right away. Right? Third thing is that we need to redefine Class 1 renewable energy sources. We have Millstone. Millstone is old 1970s, 1980s technology for nuclear production. We need to look at other possible forms of nuclear. We also have to look at other forms of hydroelectric. The big concern with hydroelectric is the disruption of the environment.
Yes.
But most of the technology today in hydroelectric is getting away from huge dams that create thousands of acres of wetlands and waterways that were not previously inundated by water. But now the technology is getting towards something that's called run-of-the-river hydroelectric. Less of an impact, smaller units that can simply use the existing run-of-the-river to generate electricity. We don't need huge Hoover Dam size facilities in Connecticut to provide and to supplement some of our electrical production. So these are things that need to be identified as Class 1 renewable energy sources that we can look at. Another one that I like to talk about is, as I said, Millstone is something that's referred to as a liquid metal fast breeder reactor. These are a cheaper source of nuclear energy production. And the reason that they were selected in the 1970s and 80s over another source of fission reactor is because they not only were cheaper, but they also had the dual purpose of being able to create and provide weapon-grade radioactive material. So that's why the government went with this. One of the new kind of ideas in nuclear reaction and fission reactors is something that's called a molten salt reactor. Have you heard about this?
I've only heard it as a tagline, as a headline. Tell me more.
So what this does is instead of water-cooled, which is what all of these fast breeder reactors are, it uses molten salt as a cooling agent. These are smaller, modular nuclear reactors. They are more expensive.
Okay.
There are concerns because they use extremely high temperatures, but they use low pressure. So there's less of a meltdown reaction concern.
Okay.
These are things that we need to open our eyes to because obviously technology is increasing at leaps and bounds over where it was in these type of energy productions years ago. So we need to look at our future, the next 50 years of energy production in Connecticut and how we're going to be able to sustain that. And nuclear reactors are not always identified as these Class 1 renewable resources. So this is something that will generate money coming into the state for future energy generation. And this is something that we need to legislatively look at if we're going to regulate these type of facilities in Connecticut. The final thing is that we need to remove the public benefits charge from the bills. These are things that are legislatively decided. They need to be included in the state budget and not rolled over as a subsidy tax to ratepayers. Those are the things that I think can immediately have an impact, and not the $6 to $10 a month impact, but looking at $50, $60, $70 a month decrease in our electric bills will be achieved by these type of things. We're coming to our second hard break here. So I want to again say that we'll be back in just a moment. This is 1400 AM, 95.3 FM, WILI, and right now with Chris, Curtis, and Mike.